Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and call to order the Sacramento County Planning Commission for August 28th, 2023. Lydia, if you'll please call the roll.
Absolutely. So Commissioners Borja.
Here.
Rethel.
Here.
Corona Sabagnano. Tatishi.
Here.
And Wong. Here. And we do have a quorum.
If you all please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you'll please make the announcements for this evening.
The county fosters public engagement during the meeting and encourages public participation, civility, and use of courteous language. To make a public comment, please complete a speaker request form and hand it to the clerk. The chairperson will call your name when it's your turn to make a comment. To make a teleconference public comment, please raise your hand in the Zoom by pressing *9. The clerk will unmute you so that you may make a comment during the public comment portion of the meeting. The time limit as set by the chair, which is
3 minutes.
Thank you. Will be the same as in-person comments. You may also send a written comment to boardclerk@saccounty.gov, and your comment will be routed to the board and filed in the record.
Thank you so much. And do you want to go ahead and get the applicants all sworn in this evening at once?
Absolutely. For the applicants, if you'd please stand and raise your right hands respectively, and the appropriate response will be "I do." So do you swear that the testimony you're about to give this commission is the truth, so help you God? If you do not swear, do so affirm. And actually, yes, when you go to the podium, if you would please state your name and make the statement, "I have been sworn." Thank you.
All right, we're going to shift the agenda up a little bit this evening. We'll start with the Board of Zoning Appeals. We've got item number 4. The item will be dropped. So, Ms. Brand, you want to kick us off and let us know what's going on there?
Yeah, briefly, the applicant did request that this item be dropped. This was an appeal of a director determination that the tentative map in question, tentative parcel map, was expired. Just for a little bit of background, staff did do some additional research, and we did conclude that we found some additional material that would allow the project to be considered a housing project under the AB 1561 statutory time extension allowances. And so with that determination, staff did reach out to the applicant, let them know that we could allow it to be considered still a valid map, and that they could request a discretionary extension, which is what they were wanting to do. And so at that point, they decided to go ahead and drop the appeal, and they have submitted for a discretionary extension at this point.
Thank you so much. And do we have any public comment on the item this evening?
And we do not.
All right. Well, I'd be happy to move the item be dropped from the agenda this evening.
Second.
And then I'm going to go ahead and use the voting machine for you. So please vote. And the motion carries.
Thank you so much. That concludes the Board of Zoning Appeals section of the agenda this evening. If you'll please call item number 1 to start off our contested agenda this evening.
Yes, so for item number 1 this evening, we have a tentative subdivision map, special development permit, minor use permit, and design review located at 3816 Annandale Lane, approximately 175 feet north of Edison Avenue in the Arden Arcade community. And the environmental document is a mitigated negative declaration. Let me raise it.
I don't see his mic either on the screen.
There we go. You're all set.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm David Ulrich, the sign planner for the Annandale Cottages at Arcade Park project. The project is a 9-lot subdivision with 8 half-plex units with attached ADUs and 1 single-family residence with an attached ADU. The project is located on Annandale Lane, which runs parallel to Watt Avenue between Edison and Auburn, approximately 235 feet north of Arcade School. The site is developed with a 1,404 square foot single-family residence and detached 575 square foot garage. Vegetation includes ornamental grasses and 9 non-native trees. The project site is zoned RD20 and has multifamily development to the north, west, and east, and single-family development to the south and southwest. The parcel dates to 1928, with the existing residence being constructed in 1949. The environmental review section reviewed the existing home, which is proposed for demolition, and confirmed that it is not eligible for listing as a historical resource. It's also important to note that there are no active code cases or previous planning entitlements on the site. The entitlement package includes a tentative subdivision map to divide a 0.94 acre parcel into 9 residential parcels and a common lot. The request also includes a special development permit to allow deviations from minimum public street frontage to allow a total of 9 parcels to be served off of a private drive. Deviations from minimum rear yard setbacks for parcels 2 through 7, with a maximum reduction of 3 feet from the 18-foot standard, with a 15-foot rear yard setback proposed. A deviation from the trash enclosure setback from residential is also requested, the standard being 25 feet. A 0-foot setback is proposed. However, adjacent multifamily is set back 25 feet from the property line on that opposite adjoining parcel. A minor use permit is also requested to allow more than 40% paving in the front yard for parcels 3 through 6. This is to allow an extra parking spot for the attached ADUs on parcels 3 through 6, and those propose 52% of the front yard being paved. A design review to determine compliance with the design guidelines is also part of the entitlement package. Here we have the tentative subdivision map. The proposed private drive is a common lot and will be owned and maintained by the HOA. Here we have the site plan. All proposed residences will take access off of that private drive. And here is the landscape plan. Both the front and rear yards are proposed to be landscaped, including shade trees in both yard areas. Here are the floor plans. Depending on the plan, the ADU is either on the first or the second story, separate from the primary unit. And here we have the elevations, a mix of colors and contemporary in design. The project was reviewed by the assigned environmental analyst, Josh Greedon, who prepared an initial study. Based on the initial study, a mitigated negative declaration has been prepared and signed by the environmental coordinator. Impacts discussed in the initial study include airports, air quality, hydrology and water quality, native trees, non-native trees, and greenhouse gas emissions, concluding that the project would result in a less than significant impact with mitigation. So both the CPAC and DRAC did review the project and recommend approval of the project. The project is consistent with all applicable policies and standards other than those requested by the special development permit and is compatible with surrounding residential uses. It would constitute missing middle housing and result in a natural transition of density from northern adjacent multifamily development, which is developed at a 25 dwelling unit per acre density, to the southern adjacent single family development, which is density of 4 dwelling units per acre. The project as proposed has a density of 10 dwelling units per acre. There are also no significant environmental concerns, and once again, the project was supported by both the DRAC and the CPAC. So Planning and Environmental Review staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the following: determine the environmental analysis prepared pursuant to CEQA is adequate and complete, adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, approve the tentative parcel map subject to findings and conditions, approve the special development permit and minor use permit subject to findings and conditions, and find the project in substantial compliance with the countywide design guidelines. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is in attendance.
Questions for staff this evening? All right, I'll kick us off. The 10 density units per acre doesn't have it assumes none of those ADUs are counted, right?
That is correct.
So it's really 20 density units per acre.
Right.
And why are I'm just trying to understand kind of, we want this missing middle housing, but it seems like really our codes are not set up to handle that missing middle housing or encourage that to be built. That was my summary takeaway of the report.
Yeah.
So it is 20 dense units per acre, which would also fit in the current zoning. That's if it was actually 20 density units per acre, it will fit in the current zoning that's there.
Right, and with the ADUs, we're not able to count those towards density per the state law, I believe.
This is Jessica Brandt. Yeah, that's correct. ADUs are exempt from density calculations. The applicants did have to strike a balance here because we also do have minimum density requirements under the general plan in our land use element. And if they had gone with 10 primary units, they would have been subject to that. And since they can't count the ADUs, they wouldn't have met that requirement. And so they actually had to effectively go down a unit in order to end up with more units. So it is you're threading a needle for sure on all of this.
And so what's the advantage to the applicant of calling it an ADU versus calling it a multifamily or condoed or duplex, a duplex that sits vertically instead of, or a fourplex, I guess, in this case, right?
I mean, I think the applicant could probably explain some of their rationale for how they designed the project. I do know, as far as some of our development standards and some of the state, preclusions, ADUs, for instance, we can't require them to have parking spaces when they're within a certain distance of transit, and I do believe there are some breaks on impact fees, and so there are a few reasons that they probably ended up going this direction, but I'll defer to the applicant. I'm sure they could provide more information.
And this is something that you guys are working on updating code to better handle?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll invite the applicant up. And if you'll start with your names, and I have been sworn, we appreciate it.
Max Boyko, I have been sworn.
And I'm Craig Hausman. I've been sworn as well. I'm the architect.
Thank you so much, guys. The floor is yours.
Well, I think there was a couple of clarifications we had first, and I think one is that they were stated as being half plexes, which is from a planning standpoint is not quite correct. From a building standpoint, it is. It's kind of a weird thing. They're single-family homes with an ADU, so when we go in for permits, building permits, that technically is a half-plex. But I think otherwise they're single-family homes, and the ADU does not count towards that. The two are on a zero property line.
Correct.
They are separated physically.
Okay.
So each cluster of homes, if you have that slide with the floor plan.
Okay, I see what you're getting at. So I can clarify further. So the zero lot line, yes, those would be single-family residential with the ADU. And so I think we do refer to them as half plexes. That's not quite correct for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and it has a tax implication on the property later. So just so we're on the record,
Sure.
Not that it would not get caught later, but, and then I think there was questions about why we divided them up the way we did, the advantages, disadvantages. When we started the project, we actually were pursuing initially an apartment multifamily configuration. And the reason that was quickly discarded had to do with the fire access that's required and the parking requirements. So in order to reduce that, we went towards dividing the lots up and creating some entry-level housing as we see it, where each of the lots is owned independently. There's an HOA for the common lot, which is the street but we saw that as a better opportunity than, say, an apartment that you're just renting. So within that, by having the ADU, to answer another question you had about what the advantage is, we see that as an opportunity for the homeowner to then become a landlord at the same time. And by having a rental property within the building, they can help defray some of the mortgage value. So a little bit of a strategy there on trying to create more value out of a smaller house. But they are 3-bedroom units. And then the ADUs themselves also have 2, I believe. Sorry, we literally designed this in 2021. Yeah, they're 2 bedrooms. So you got 5 bedrooms total per unit. And as was mentioned, we actually had to drop a unit. It would have been higher density. So I think that was the questions so far that were asked. If there's any others, feel free.
And so the intent is actually to sell the single-family dwelling separate from the ADU, or those will be sold as one?
They'll be sold as a halfplex.
They would be on one parcel, so they would have to be sold as one. And as Craig mentioned, the intent was to build kind of a different type of a community. It's just the way that the lot sits, there was no way to create the access to be able to do that. So we had to get creative and ended up with a tentative map versus just creating entitlements for one project on the lot.
One thing that was mentioned had to do with parking and the exemption that ADUs typically have. We will note that we did provide parking for each of the ADUs in addition. So we kind of went above and beyond the minimal parking requirements and still met the density and the coverage. So we were pretty happy with that.
Yeah, it seems like is it 31 spots total?
Yep.
Do we have other questions for the applicant this evening? All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Commissioners.
With that, we'll move on to public comment.
And there are no public comments this evening.
All right. We did have one public comment come in right before that. That was a resident directly to the east of this. So if I could have you guys come back up, I'll just kind of summarize this. I don't know if she was going to be online tonight or not, but it looks like there was some concerns as far as privacy goes with the multifamily to the east of this project and the reduction in rear yard setback.
So, Commissioner, I'm not sure if the applicants had a chance to see that.
It just came in.
Yeah. But I will say that staff did take a quick look at it, and I do believe it was the neighbor that's at the very bottom southwest corner of the site that's to the east. And with the plans that are being proposed, there's likely going to be minimal intrusion as far as privacy. Because there is the landscaping that's going to be put into the backyards as part of this project. And it also should, as far as we can tell from the site plan, just be a single unit that might end up being directly across from the commenter's unit. And then we also have some fencing that will go in as well. So,
Yeah, that's the way it looked to me. It's like it would be a landscape, more of a landscaping question than a change in the rear yard setback. So. Perfect. Staff answered the question. So thank you guys.
We
so
like that.
All right. So no other public comments. We'll go ahead and close public comment, and we'll move on to deliberation.
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion before I call for a vote? All right. Please call the roll.
Please vote. And that was really fast. So the motion carries. Thank you.
There we go. All right. Thank you so much. That concludes item number 1. If you go ahead and call item number 2.
And for item number 2, we have the North Vineyard Station Specific Plan Amendment, a rezone, a tentative subdivision map and design review, located east of located east of Bradshaw Road, south of Florin Road, and north of Gerber Road in the Vineyard community. And the environmental document is that it's exempt.
All right, good evening, Commissioners. Emma Patton here to present the Oxform project to you. We'll get started with location and setting. The project site is located north of Gerber Road and east of Bradshaw Road within the Vineyard community. The project is also located within the North Vineyard Station specific plan area. The subject site is vacant with only foundations of former structures remaining. The project site is currently zoned AR10, but this property and the surrounding properties are designated primarily for residential development pursuant to the North Vineyard Station specific plan. The property directly to the north is the approved but unconstructed Murphy subdivision. To the south is the Gerber Creek. To the east is a planned park and basin, and to the west is an existing residence. I will note that property to the north, the approved Murphy subdivision, is the topic of item 3 on this evening's agenda. The applicant requests numerous planning entitlements, including a North Vineyard Station specific plan amendment. The specific plan amendment proposes changes to both the specific plan's land use designation and circulation patterns. The applicant also proposes a rezone, a tentative subdivision map, and a design review. I'll go into detail on each of these entitlements on slides to follow. First, I want to note that there was an exemption prepared pursuant to the Public Resources Code and CEQA guidelines, as it was determined that the project as proposed would not result in new impacts not already analyzed under the environmental impact report prepared for the North Vineyard Station specific plan. The project would result in less than significant impact with the implementation of mitigation measures. This slide details the proposed specific plan amendment related to land use. Today, the 17.9 acre site is designated as single-family residential 4 through 7, single-family residential 1 through 3, and detention basin. As proposed, the 16.5 acres would be designated as single-family residential 4 through 7, and 1.4 acres would be designated as park. This slide details the proposed specific plan amendment related to circulation. This slide shows how the Oxform site interacts with the adjacent park and detention basin planned to the east and the planned circulation that travels through. As currently proposed, Oxform Lane is planned to travel from Bradshaw Road through the project site and curving north. Similarly, Sire Lane, which is referred to as 19th Street in the specific plan, is proposed to travel north from Gerber Road before curving west into Oxform Lane. Instead, the applicant proposes to straighten the alignment of Oxform Lane and Sire Lane. This proposed alignment allows for a more efficient use of that park and basin property to the east of the Oxform project site. Specifically, it would allow for the detention basin to serve a greater capacity, partially required by the increased density from the Oxform project and other surrounding developments, while maintaining a portion of the planned park site as unencumbered by drainage improvements. This slide details the proposed rezone from AR10 to RD7 with the proposed specific plan amendment related to land use. This slide features the proposed tentative subdivision map. The map would divide a 17.9 acre site into 95 single-family residential lots, one 1.4 acre park lot, and 4 landscape lots. Access to the subdivision would be served via Oxform Lane from Bradshaw Road and via the Murphy subdivision to the north, also from Bradshaw Road. Oxform Lane would feature a 25-foot wide landscape corridor on either side with a separated sidewalk. There's also 2 courts that are proposed within the tentative subdivision map. Those courts would feature sort of a live-end cul-de-sac to provide pedestrian access to Oxform Lane for more direct routes to amenities such as the planned park. Staff brought this project to both the Design Review Advisory Committee and the Community Planning Advisory Council for their recommendations. The DRAC reviewed the project in February 2023 and recommended that the project be found in compliance with the design guidelines. The Vineyard CPAC met in March of 2023. Council members noted that they were concerned about the proposed increase in density, noting that several subdivisions within the specific plan area have been requesting density increases beyond what was originally anticipated within the plan. And there was an interest in seeing a variety of housing product types, including lower density product types. Another council member noted that they would like to see more coordination with the property owner directly to the west and attention to safety and security. This suggestion was provided in response to concerns from neighbors to the west who suggested that the community be gated. Ultimately, at the end of the CPAC meeting, no formal recommendation was made. Staff reviewed the proposed project for compliance with applicable codes and policies. The proposed project is consistent with the general plan and the specific plan policies. The proposed complies with all applicable lot standards. The specific plan amendment would allow for more efficient use of the county-owned property to the east to manage increased drainage needs in response to the proposal for increased density while also maintaining unencumbered parkland. There are no significant environmental concerns with the implementation of mitigation measures, and the project can be found in substantial compliance with the design guidelines. Based on this, staff is recommending approval of the project. The decision body for this item is the Board of Supervisors, so your recommendation this evening will be provided to them for their final consideration. Staff recommends that you recommend to recognize the exempt status of the project, adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, adopt the resolution amending the North Vineyard Station specific plan, that you approve the rezone, approve the tentative subdivision map, and finally find the project in substantial compliance with the design guidelines. That concludes my presentation this evening for the Oxford subdivision map. Available for any questions you have, and the applicant is also in attendance today.
Questions for staff this evening?
I have a question.
Commissioner Wong?
Hi. I guess I have a two-part question. I'm still trying to wrap my head, so let me start over, sorry. First question is, it's my understanding that the staff report refers to Public Resources Code 21155.4 as the basis of its exemption, but after talking with staff, it seems like that was a typo, and the reliance is actually on Government Code Section 65457. Is that something that needs to be corrected as a part of recommendations when it comes time to vote on the matter? Does it matter if we're citing the correct code section? Because I don't know if this project qualifies under PRC 21155.4 for a CEQA exemption, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around whether or not it could apply for a CEQA exemption under Government Code Section 65457.
I can pass it on to our environmental coordinator to answer.
Good evening, Commissioners. Julie Newton, Environmental Coordinator with County Planning. Commissioner Wong, yes, you are correct. We spoke briefly before the meeting. The notice of exemption that was prepared referenced two sections, referenced the CEQA guidelines, which was correctly referenced, section 15182, which says that residential projects implementing a specific plan are exempt from CEQA. The Public Resources Code that was referenced was incorrect. That relates to another section of that guidelines section. What is correct is Government Code Section 65457, which is the governing code for specific plans, which also says that projects that are undertaken to implement and are consistent with a specific plan are exempt from CEQA. So with the Planning Commission being a recommending body, I mean, this is something that would be revised prior to going to the Board of Supervisors. But we have prepared the content of the exemption correctly relies on Government Code Section 65457, as well as CEQA Guidelines Section 15182. Demonstrating our analysis of why the project is consistent with the specific plan and does not meet any of the criteria that would require subsequent or further environmental review.
Okay, and that actually leads me to my second question, and I don't know if there's any relevant case law on this or things that would help explain this better, or examples that would help explain this better, but we're relying this exemption on the fact that it's consistent with the specific plan. If it's already consistent with the specific plan, why the need to amend the specific plan?
Right. So for CEQA purposes, when we're looking at consistency with the specific plan, we're looking at the analysis of the certified EIR for that specific plan. That EIR assumed a full build out of the specific plan of 6,339 units. So with this project, they are proposing additional density beyond what that specific plan assumed. What we have found is, as other projects in the specific plan have built out, some of those have built under density. So there are some units that did not go accounted for. Therefore, while this project would be slightly increasing density, we're not seeing an increase in impacts. As far as what was analyzed under the environmental impact report, what we're seeing is a redistribution of some units. And then that's what we've further outlined in our exemption is, outlining why the redistribution of units does not further exacerbate or introduce any new impacts, but that it was covered under the umbrella of the original specific plan EIR. And there is, and then to your question about case law, there is case law, and some we've referenced in the exemption. Concerned Dublin Citizens versus City of Dublin is a case that we looked at in preparing this that spoke to that concept of reallocating some units that were within the total capacity of the specific plan.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll go for a follow-up question on that. In other jurisdictions, I've seen them actually map out the redistribution of units, because oftentimes you have different landowners that have those, that where you're pushing them or taking away, but you're saying there's extra capacity currently within the specific plan to where we don't have to penalize future projects to add density here.
At this point, and I'll look to Emma to perhaps elaborate, because she's been the one who's been most closely tracking our most recent unit build-outs. But yes, at this point, it is it's our determination that there is excess units that could accommodate this project. That's not to say this would be true of every project that comes in the future if they were not consistent with the designations already.
And in that case, they would have to strike an agreement somewhere else to take units from those. Is that?
That could be one solution. They could work with another property owner who has units available, and through a specific plan amendment that resulted in reduced units in one parcel, make up for the same allocation in a separate parcel. More likely what I imagine would happen in that sort of an instance is they would just be subject to some additional environmental review and additional scrutiny through our specific plan amendment process that they may not need to go through today, given that there are units available.
So when you say there's 6,339 units, we can go back to the CPAC and say that will be the plan going forward, that will be built out, 6,339, or has that number changed over time? Has it gone up above what was originally?
The specific plan as it is prepared today is based on, and I don't have the exact unit number in my head, that 6,000 some odd units, and so that's the plan that we're working with. If there are future amendments to that plan that result in an increase in density, those would go through this planning entitlement process.
Through through environmental review at that point.
And
to
would be
change that.
subject to environmental review at that point, yes.
Got it. Can you walk me through the change in zoning with the lower density residential and how there was a bonus density calculation with those? I'm just trying to understand that comment that was made, that like it looked like some of the original lower density stuff would actually have been built out at 5 density units per acre.
Can you help me with some context here?
Yeah, let me find the condition.
I think it's Murphy that got a density bonus.
That's what I'm assuming too. So the Murphy project, just to the north, they have a land use designation. I guess it was a single-family residential 1 through 3, but they were awarded a density bonus through their planning entitlement application. And so, in all reality, it's developing at a density that's very similar to the density that the Oxform subdivision is being developed at. And so, it ends up in terms of the housing product type, we anticipate that it would be fairly similar between the two, and strongly relate with one another.
Got it. So that was related to the project to
There's
the
the
north,
project to the
not
north,
to the
kind of
section.
context,
Got it.
exactly.
Right, yeah, okay.
Context and compatibility.
Thank you so much for that clarification. Other questions for staff this evening? All right, thanks,
Thank you.
Ms. Patton. At this time, we'll invite the applicant up to address the commission. And if you could start with your name and I have been sworn.
Thank you. Hi, good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. My name is George Carpenter. I'm with Wind Communities, and I have been sworn. It's a little bit funny to talk about this project because it really ties together with the project to the north, Murphy, and the explanation for why I'm going to ask you to approve the development agreement for Murphy really ties to this project as well. But maybe what I'll just start with here on the Oxform is this is a subdivision map, 95 lots, and it was a little bit of a puzzle to put together. And so I want to thank Emma Patton for helping come up with the land plan for this particular project. As you saw during the presentation, we have a park next to us, we have a detention basin next to us, we have to change some road patterns, and we have some land planning. And Emma was helpful in getting Southgate together with DOT, DWR, and planning, and coming up with a project that we're proposing to you tonight. And so I'll just get to the end of kind of my Murphy presentation to begin with this one, which is the east of Bradshaw has really struggled in the North Vineyard Station specific plan to get off the ground, and the problem was the infrastructure hurdles. And so this Oxform project, the 95 units that will go with the 170 units in the Murphy, allows us to finance the infrastructure that opens the plan area up and opens the area up east of Bradshaw. And so when we get to the next item, I don't want to get too far into that now because I know we're limited to talk about Oxform here. But when we get to that, I can explain to you the infrastructure benefits for the whole area to building out both Oxform and Murphy together. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for the applicant this evening? Do you want to talk to me just briefly about fence design? I'm just curious. It looks like the fence was changed up just from masonry and steel. I'm just curious.
There's fences in multiple locations, so which one would you be referring to? They were along the south, along the creek. We're required to have the open fencing along there. And then with respect to adjacent to the park and adjacent to Oxform Lane, Southgate requires that we have masonry walls there instead of wood fence, and so that's what we're proposing.
So the lands that are adjacent to Southgate are going to have the masonry?
Right, yes.
Got it. That was what their letter had referenced, so that solves my concern. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll move on to public comment.
And there are no public comments.
All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment and move on to deliberation.
I guess I'll start off. I want to thank staff for being patient with me and helping me walk through the different exemptions that were potentially available. Initially, I had some concerns with this project because I wasn't sure that the CEQA exemption that we were relying on would be applicable. And if we're going to use a CEQA exemption, I want to make sure that it applies, and we don't want to be subject to a CEQA challenge or anything for using the wrong exemption. But thanks to staff's patience and their diligence, was able to walk me through it. And I think that the government code section does appropriately apply. None of the exemptions to the exception apply, because it does say that if any of the that section does say that if any of the events that occur in another public resources code section happen, then the exemption does not apply and a supplemental EIR has to be done. And looking at those circumstances, I don't think any of them apply in this case. So thank you, staff.
Thanks, Commissioner Wong. Any other comments this evening or a motion?
Just a couple of comments, Chair. I want to also echo my appreciation with staff, but also to the project applicants who had invited to share a little bit about the project ahead of this meeting. I did ask them questions about the traffic impacts that would, eventually happen, and they were able to assure me, at least point me to the resources that it was adequately addressed. So with that said, I'd be happy to make a motion to support staff recommendation tonight.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further deliberation? All right, please call for a vote.
Please vote. Motion carries with those members present.
Thank you so much. Will you please call item number 3?
And for item number 3 this evening, we have a development agreement located on the east side of Bradshaw Road, approximately a half a mile south of the intersection with Florin Road in the Vineyard community. An environmental document is an addendum to a prior mitigated negative declaration.
Good evening, Planning Commission, Chair Rathel. My name is Emma Carrico. I'm an associate planner and project manager for the Murphy Project Development Agreement. So the project is located on a 39.8 acre vacant parcel on the east side of Bradshaw Road, approximately half a mile south of the intersection with Florin Road to the north there in the Vineyard community. A little bit of community context here. The red line you see on the screen is the North Vineyard Station specific plan boundary. To the north is the Florin Vineyard Gap Community Plan, and to the south is the Vineyard Springs Community Plan. Parcels shown in pink here are constructed subdivisions within the North Vineyard Station specific plan. The one small orange parcel you see, number 11, is both constructed and recorded. The blue parcels are approved with development pending, and the green are within the entitlement process, currently pending. Parcel 18 is the Oxform subdivision you just heard, so that would actually be blue once the board has approved it, assuming they do. And parcel 17 is the Murphy project in blue there that has already been approved. This is the Murphy tentative subdivision map that was prior approved in 2006. The map was originally approved on July 19th, 2006. The board approved the Murphy tentative subdivision map dividing the 39.8 acre property into 170 single-family residential lots, 2 multifamily lots, and 7 landscape corridor lots. The tentative map was approved for a 3-year period, originally expiring on August 19th, 2009. Several statutory time extensions, including the 18-month time extension under AB 1561 during the COVID-19 pandemic, applied to this map. Additionally, several discretionary time extensions were approved by the Planning Commission over the last decade, all resulting in a current expiration date of March 12th, 2024. So the map is currently active, although no further extensions are available. Which brings us to our current request. On March 29th, 2023, the applicant submitted a request to enter into a development agreement with the county pursuant to Government Code 65867.5, as there are no further time extensions available to the project. Point of clarification, the government code referenced on the screen allows a private entity to enter into an agreement with a government entity. The government code that specifically allows a map to be, the life of a tentative map to be extended by a development agreement is Government Code Section 66452.6A1. The proposed development agreement would have a term of 10 years, extending the current expiration date of March 12th, 2024 to March 12th, 2034. It also defines the responsibilities of the county and the property owner and details the expected phasing of development of the Murphy project. The property owner obligations under the development agreement would include participation in the South Sacramento Habitat Conservation Plan, SSHCP, including compliance with the avoidance and minimization measures and the payment of mitigation fees to acquire certain key strategic preserves identified in the SSHCP. Payment of advance funding totaling $1,461,327 for design, environmental review, and right-of-way acquisition costs associated with various transportation improvements, both on and off-site. Construction of certain infrastructure improvements to benefit other nearby approved and pending subdivisions. Compliance with the county's current affordable housing ordinance, along with any future amendments to the county's affordable housing ordinance. And compliance with the Cal Green Building Standards Code, including providing electric vehicle charging facilities consistent with Cal Green. The county's obligations under the development agreement would include granting vested rights to the property owner to develop the subject site consistent with the approved tentative subdivision map for the term of the agreement, agreeing to work expeditiously in processing and reviewing complete applications for amendments to the Murphy project, and cooperating in good faith with the property owner in securing state and federal permits that may be required for development of the project. The applicant has provided a project justification statement that, along with staff's analysis, has justified that the Murphy project is required to construct off-site infrastructure improvements supporting other planned subdivisions in the specific plan. Additionally, the Murphy and Oxform subdivisions, which you previously heard, together provide the critical mass necessary to support these improvements. And I'll go into these in a little more specific detail in the next couple slides. So these are some of the off-site infrastructure improvements that the Murphy project is conditioned to provide. At the very north top end of that red boundary there, running east-west, is the Murphy subdivision. That project is required to provide a series of off-site improvements, including upgrades to 9th Street, a new watershed basin, a water line extension, a storm drain extension, a sewer line extension, and perhaps most critically, the Bradshaw intersection creation and Bradshaw widening. These improvements are critical to being able to develop other pending and approved subdivisions within the North Vineyard Station specific plan, including most of the ones shown in green on the previous slide. As mentioned, the Murphy and Oxform subdivisions together create 265 total lots. Those are just single-family lots as subdivided on the approved tentative subdivision map for Murphy and proposed tentative subdivision map for Oxform. These units provide sort of enough of a critical mass of sellable property for the developer to have enough capital to actually extend those sewer, water, storm, transportation improvements out past east of Bradshaw. The environmental review section prepared an initial study and mitigated negative declaration along with the original proposal of the Murphy tentative subdivision map back on July 19th, 2006. The board adopted this initial study and mitigated negative declaration, as well as a mitigation monitoring and reporting program, again, prepared for the Murphy tentative subdivision map. The current environmental document is an addendum to this initial study and mitigated negative declaration, which was previously approved by the board. The Vineyard Community Planning Advisory Council did meet on May 11th, 2023 to consider the proposal. Unfortunately, there was a lack of quorum at that meeting, so no vote was formally taken, but the proposal was supported by all of the council members present. At this time, Planning and Environmental Review staff is recommending the Planning Commission make the following recommendations to the board. Determine that the previous mitigated negative declaration and mitigation monitoring and reporting plan together with the CEQA addendum prepared for the previous time extensions and the CEQA addendum prepared for the development agreement proposed today, are complete and in compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act. Additionally, we recommend that you recommend to the board to approve the development agreement subject to findings and conditions. I'm happy to take any questions you all have today, and the applicant, as you have already seen, is here.
Thank you, Ms. Carrico. Questions for staff this evening? Mr. Borja?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Really appreciate the very thorough explanation of what's happening and as the units and kind of showing to us like the community that's being set in place. Can you share with us a little bit about why a development agreement would be you mentioned that in your staff analysis, but outside of fronting some of that infrastructure improvements, would this development agreement, address any other hurdles in the future, or perhaps, I don't know if you can say expedite, but at least ensure that these units may be delivered in this community?
Yeah, so under development agreements, we generally have more ability to negotiate with the developer, the applicant, and to amend the development agreement as we move forward. So development agreements are subject to annual periodic review. So that will not only sort of give the board and the planning commission an idea of how development is progressing during that time, but if, let's say, one party of the development agreement was not holding up their end of the bargain, there is the potential to revise a development agreement, or additionally, you could extend the life of a development agreement beyond what was originally approved. So it is a little more of a living document than some of, like, say, an original tentative subdivision map approval. Additionally, beyond the sort of cementing and giving the applicant time to provide these off-site improvements that are required as part of the tentative subdivision map for the Murphy project, we also have cemented within the DA the requirement that the applicant sort of keep pace with any changes to the affordable housing ordinance. So there was an original affordable housing plan approved with the Murphy tentative subdivision map. Now the applicant will have to comply with the current affordable housing ordinance. So that kind of keeps it up to date as the development of the project goes along. Additionally, as mentioned, the Cal Green standards, Title 24, they will have to keep pace with changes to those as well. So there's a little bit of give and take. The applicant gets more time to develop. The county gets the benefits that come with that development for other subdivisions to improve and be developed east of Bradshaw. And then the county also gets some benefits in terms of having the applicant keep up with current ordinances and standards.
Understood. And if you may, just a follow-up question. By entering into this development agreement, all of the future units would still be subject to permitting and entitlement review.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like kind of layperson's terms, like just signing or supporting a development agreement does not preclude or subside any of the other land use and entitlement requirements.
That is correct, yeah. So all of the standard improvement plans, civil plans, building plan process, and permitting are still applicable to the project for each individual parcel. Those two multifamily lot A and B that together total about 7.7 acres. Those aren't proposed for development under the Murphy tentative subdivision project. They would still have to go through, design review, or if they were proposed to be subdivided, they would still have to go through a tentative subdivision map process. So the development agreement is really more applicable to the development of the tentative subdivision map that was approved under the Murphy project. It doesn't change anything about the actual permitting or entitlement process for actual development on the ground or future entitlements.
Thank you. And just one last question, Chair Ethel. Since the applicant or the proposal, the folks proposing the projects fronting the 1.x amount of million, can you explain to us, or just for the community, how would the county or the applicant, I guess, be able to recuperate the funds that they've since fronted, and would the county be on the hook for things like interest rate, or the changes of the money by the time that 10-year plan is going to be? Is there some sort of like payback agreement that the county would need to provide that goes above and beyond the amount that they're fronting?
So there is a public financing and funding plan associated with this project. The applicant could speak a little more to the sort of specifics within that plan, as well as our principal planner, Jessica Brandt, here could speak to that as well. But there is we call it a PFFP associated with the plan that lays out how reimbursement and what fees will be covered by the county versus the applicant and that kind of thing. That was approved with the tentative subdivision map for the Murphy project back in 2006.
Okay, thank you.
So just for clarification, this only applies to the Murphy project. This development agreement doesn't apply to any other properties owned by this owner.
That is correct. So this would only apply to the Murphy tentative subdivision map. We talk about it in conjunction with the Oxform map simply because, like I said, those two sort of provide that critical mass for the applicant to gain capital and extend those improvements. But as far as extending the life of the map, it would only extend the life of the Murphy tentative subdivision map.
And then this may be more of a question for council, but is there any further obligation that we're getting ourselves into extending past 2034 or at 10 years? Like, is there any, I know with tentative subdivision maps, we have these kind of almost automatic extensions now, but with a DA, at the end of 10 years, if we're still sitting in the same situation, we don't have any automatic extension or obligation to do that.
We would have to amend the agreement to extend the term. I guess that could be done in 10 years. But no, there's no more, as I understand it, there are no more MAP Act extensions, whether discretionary or automatic.
But there's no obligation for us to extend this further under this agreement. It's like, hey, 10 years, and we could end it at that point if the development still hasn't come forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is a provision within the development agreement that if both parties were amenable, the development agreement could be amended to extend it further, but they would still have to go through this entire entitlement process again to amend that development agreement.
Okay, and the last one's more of a general question, and that's just kind of looking holistically at what's going on in the area. Does staff see any reason why this project wouldn't be approved today if it were to come back and ask for re-entitlement, just based on the other development around in the area?
I would say that probably our senior and principal planners could speak better to sort of the policy of the county, but I will say that some of those provisions and standards that would have changed were we to see this map today, like the affordable housing ordinance and the Cal Green codes, were sort of accounted for within this development agreement. So like I said, the development agreement has those provisions that require the applicant to keep pace with any future amendments to those ordinances and requirements. So those standards that would have changed are kind of encapsulated in the DA, but I will let our principal planner speak to sort of the policy of the county.
I would just echo Emma's sentiments. I think it's still a relevant, reasonable project for the area. Yeah. I would also add, we did actually negotiate on the timeline of the DA. The applicant did want a longer time period, and we did discuss that with them. They are making progress on a lot of items in order to make this a real project, and so I think that was key, and 10 years seemed appropriate just in case there's another economic blip. It kind of takes that into account, but it's not so long as to make this seem completely out of whack with whatever is being developed at the time.
Yeah, for a little more specificity, the applicant did come in asking for 20 years. We suggested potentially 6 years, consistent with if they were to start the time extension process all over again, the total they would be allowed to get would be 6, kind of negotiated to meet in the middle at 10. And like Jessica said, that does sort of take into account the sort of cyclical economic situation that developers often have to contend with developing these larger subdivisions.
Thanks for that background. That answered my next question. Any other questions for staff this evening?
Just one quick one. Out of curiosity, again, thank you for the explanation. How many development agreements do we currently have right now as a county?
I don't know that number off the top of my head. They are fairly rare. It is not something that we typically are jumping to enter into or that we see proposed very often. Most commonly, they're actually used as sort of a specificity document for when we have these subdivisions get approved. approved. The development agreement lays out things like phasing and how the subdivision will be developed. And so sometimes they are adopted from the get-go with larger subdivisions, master plans, specific plans, those types of things. But this is sort of a unique project in that the county felt like there was enough benefit to development of the MVSSP and the county itself that it warranted sort of using the development agreement as allowed by the government code to kind of act as a further time extension. It's not a very common thing that we see.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll invite the applicant up. Welcome back.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Commission. George Carpenter, Wind Communities, and I have been sworn. I did have a slide. Do you have that, Emma? It's really helpful in explaining kind of the geography out here.
It's the services one, the infrastructure side.
Yeah, that one will work. That's just fine. Thank you very much. Okay, so again, George Carpenter with Wind Communities. I want to thank Emma for the explanation regarding the development agreement. We don't see those very often here in Sacramento County, but we do a lot of development in the 6-county SACOG region, and we do use development agreements pretty frequently. But here, I just want to address two things. One, why this is something that's good for the county, and then secondly, why haven't we developed this property? It's, the maps was originally approved in 2006, and then finally, just what are our plans going forward? This area of North Vineyard Station, as I explained earlier, east of Bradshaw, has really had a difficult time getting off the ground. And the reason is all the improvements that are shown up on this exhibit, plus some of the other obligations, are about $10 million worth of work. And no single individual developer had enough lots in east of Bradshaw to be able to get their project off the ground. For 170 lots of our Murphy project, that was about $58,000 a lot, and it was just too much. But the first thing that happened, in 2020, we were able to buy the Oxform property. And so that added 95 lots to our calculation. And so that brought the per lot cost down about $20,000. And so that was the first thing that happened. Second thing that happened is Taylor Morrison has started working on the Wild Hawk project south of Gerber Road. And as part of that, they had to improve Gerber Creek and build what they call the G46 drainage basin. And that was another big heavy lift that our Murphy project was not able to do on its own. And then the last thing that happened that really has kind of changed the calculation in North Vineyard Station is the Department of Transportation, County Department of Transportation, undertook a mitigation strategy. There are these traffic triggers that have really expensive improvements that you need to do once you get to certain thresholds in North Vineyard Station. But the County Department of Transportation, trying to look at how to spur more development, especially east of Bradshaw, was able to do a recalculation. They took that to the Planning Commission board earlier this year. And so I do want to say, a shout out to Department of Transportation for really trying to take the initiative to be able to get more projects off the ground out here, because this is an area that's approved for development. It's been approved for development for a long time, and it's finally allowing this area to start building out. So just kind of where do we go from here if this project is approved? The Murphy project, the grading plans are already been approved, and we were trying to start grading this summer, but we just didn't quite get there in time. So this will be a spring 2024 grading. And we have paid the mitigation fees already for this property of $1.5 million. And we've also paid the first part of a payment for Department of Transportation to do design and engineering of some key transportation improvements in this part of the county. And within 60 days of the board's approval of this development agreement, we'll make a second $700,000 payment. And those dollars allow DOT to start doing design and engineering. And it's something they're not, they just don't normally have money to do that. And so it's a really good benefit for both us and for the county. Commissioner Borja made a comment earlier about how do developers get their money back. Well, so what we did is when we make the payments that the $1.4 million for the county to use for design and engineering, the county enters into a credit and reimbursement agreement with us. And so instead of us having to pay a transportation impact fee at each building permit, we get a credit towards that based on the 1.4 million that we up front. So we do get that back over time as we pull building permits. And it's not something we like doing, advancing those kinds of dollars, but we do realize the benefit to both us and the county there. So I think with that, maybe the last thing is just our improvement plans. We have those designed and are in the county SIPS department right now, and so we're working with Department of Water Resources to get those plans cut loose so that we can be ready to start doing site improvements next year, and maybe home construction will start before the end of 2024. And so with that, thank you, and I ask that you approve it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. I appreciate all that background. Questions for the applicant this evening? All right. Thank you. We'll move on to public comment.
And there are no public comments.
We will go ahead and close public comment and move on to deliberation.
I'll move staff recommendations.
I'll second.
All right. Any comments or deliberation before we call for a vote? All right. Please call the vote.
Please vote. And the motion carries with those members present.
All right, that concludes item number 3 this evening. We'll move on to the planning director's report.
Okay, good evening, Jessica Brandt again. And I do not have a planning director report this evening. I would like to talk about scheduling, which I think is the next item.
Perfect. On to item number 6.
Okay, so as I've mentioned a couple of times, we do have some packed agendas coming up. The next meeting that we have scheduled is September 11th, and I believe we have at least one out. Commissioner Wong? Yeah, okay. But it sounded like Commissioner Borja, Commissioner Rathel, and Commissioner Tatishi, you will all be present on the 11th. That's what you got.
That's what I got.
Correct.
Okay. So we do have 4 items. 2 are project items and 2 are zoning code amendments. So it should be kind of an interesting night. The 25th, we also have 4 items. 3 of them are project items, and one of them is an appeal of a director determination on the advanced agenda. And I believe we might have 4.
I will also be out on that.
Okay.
I will be out on the 25th.
Okay. So we will follow up with Commissioner Corona Sabagnano and see if we have a quorum for that. Okay. And then the October 9th usually scheduled meeting is canceled due to the county holiday. And then the 23rd would be the next one. And I won't get into advanced agenda for that yet. And that's the end of my scheduling. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And do we have any public comments?
And there are no further public comments for the rest of the agenda.
All right. Any comments from our commissioners this evening? All right. I just wanted to adjourn tonight. We got some unfortunate news this morning that one of our Vineyard CPAC, the chair, has passed away. And so just wanted to thank Emily Brantley for her service to the Vineyard community and adjourn in her honor this evening. Thank you all for being here tonight.